Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Shri Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Ki Jai Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasa Tato Jayamudhirayet. Before reading from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, we bring our obeisances to Narayana Rishi, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the highest human being, Vyasadeva, the compiler of this book, and the goddess Saraswati, the goddess of learning. Hare Krishna. So I think we'll speak in English. Most of you speak English, I think. Wer versteht kein Englisch? Kishori Kund. Kannst du übersetzen, Sanjay? So, Sanjay übersetzt ins Deutsche. Kannst du hier das Bhagavatam nehmen? So, we are reading currently from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Bhagavat Purana, Canto 4, Chapter 9, which is entitled Dhruva Maharaj Returns Home, verse 18 and 19. So which one is on the board? 18 is on the board, okay. Please repeat. Maitreya Uvacham Atabhishtutam Evam Vai Satsankalpena Dhimatam Brityanurakto Bhagavan Pratinandyedam Abravit Maitreya Vacham Atabhishtutam Vaim Satsankalpena Dhimatam Brityanurakto Bhagavan Pratinandyena Abravit Maitreya Vacham Atabhishtuta evam vai Satsankalpena Dhimata Brityanurakto Bhagavan Pratinandyenam Abravit Maitreya Vacham Atabhishtuta evam vai Satsankalpena dhimata Brityanurakto Bhagavan Pratinandyedam abravit. Hare Krishna, so you can try to lead. Maitreya Vacha Maitreya Vacha Avishtuta evam vai Sankalpena dhimata Bhagavan Tidnandyenam abravit. Anybody else? Maitreya Vacha Atabhishtuta evam vai Satsankalpena dhimata Vityanurakta Bhagavan Chidamjinam abraved. Ladies, maybe? Bhagavan Pratinandyedam abravit. Anybody else want to try? Maitreya Vacha Atabhishtuta evam vai Satsankalpena dhimata Brityanurakto Bhagavan Pratinandyedam abravit. Thank you. Word by word, please repeat. Maitreya Uvacha. Maitreya said. Atam, then. Abhishtutaha, being worshipped. Evam, thus. Vai, certainly. Satsankalpena, by Dhruva Maharaj, who had only good desires in his heart. Only good desires in his heart. Dhimata, because he was very intelligent. Britya Anuraktaha, very favorably disposed towards devotees. Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Pratinandya, having congratulated him. Idam, this. Abravit, said. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The great sage Maitreya continued, my dear Vidura, when Dhruva Maharaj, who had good intentions in his heart, finished his prayers, the Supreme Lord, the Personality of Godhead, who is very kind to his devotees and servants, congratulated him, speaking as follows. Text 19. Śrī-Bhagavan Vacha Vedaham Te Vyavasitam Hridiranya Balaka Tat Prachami Bhadram Te Durapam Api Suvratam. Translation. The Personality of Godhead said, my dear Dhruva, son of the king, you have executed pious vows, and I also know the desire within your heart. Although your desire is very ambitious and very difficult to fulfill, I shall favor you with its fulfillment. All good fortune unto you. Purport. The Lord is so merciful to his devotee that he immediately said to Dhruva Maharaj, "Let there be all good fortune to you." The fact is that Dhruva Maharaj was very much afraid in his mind, for he had aspired after material benefit in discharging his devotional service, and this was hampering him from reaching the stage of love of God. In the Bhagavad Gita 2:44 it is said, Bhogaishvarya prasaktanam. Those who are addicted to material pleasure cannot be attracted to devotional service. It was true that at heart Dhruva Maharaj wanted a kingdom that would be far better than Brahmaloka. This was a natural desire for a Kshatriya. He was also only 5 years old, and in his childish way he desired to have a kingdom far greater than his fathers and grandfathers or great-grandfathers. His father Uttanapada was the son of Manu, and Manu was the son of Brahma. Dhruva wanted to excel all these great family members. The Lord knew Dhruva Maharaj's childish ambition, but how was it possible to offer Dhruva a position more exalted than Lord Brahma's? The Lord assured Dhruva Maharaj that Dhruva would not be bereft of the Lord's love. He encouraged Dhruva not to be worried that he childishly had material desires and at the same time had the pure aspiration to be a great devotee. Generally, the Lord does not award a pure devotee material opulence, even though he may desire it. But Dhruva Maharaj's case was different. The Lord knew that he was such a great devotee that in spite of having material opulence, he would never be deviated from love of God. This example illustrates that a highly qualified devotee can have the facility of material enjoyment and at the same time execute love of God. This, however, was a special case for Dhruva Maharaj. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shriyuta Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitamtam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopipakanta Radhakanta Namostate Jayatam Surato Pangor Mamamanda Matirgati Matsarvasva Padam Vojo Radhamadana Mohano Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpadrumada Srimad Ratangara Simhasanasto Srimad Radha Srila Govinda Deva Upreshtalivi Savimano Smarami Srimandra Sarasaramvi Vamsiva Tatatastitaha Karsham Veno Swanair Gopir Gopinata Shriyestunaha Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Once again the two verses. Maitreya vacha athabishta evam vai satsankalpena dhimata brityanurakto bhagavan pratinandyedam abravit. The great sage Maitreya continued, "My dear Vidura, when Dhruva Maharaj, who had good intentions in his heart, finished his prayers, the Supreme Lord, the Personality of Godhead, who was very kind to his devotees and servants, congratulated him, speaking as follows. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Vedaham Te Vyavasitam Hridi Rangyaya Bhalaka Tat Prachayami Bhadram Te Durapam Api Suvratam. the personality of Godhead said, "My dear Dhruva, son of the king, you have executed pious vows, and I also know the desire within your heart. Although your desire is very ambitious and very difficult to fulfill, I shall favor you with its fulfillment. All good fortune unto you." Hare Krishna. Good morning. So we are continuing with the story of Dhruva Maharaj. So who of you know the story of Dhruva Maharaj? You know Brian, huh? A little bit. So we'll tell it again because most of you don't know. So Dhruva Maharaj is, like we heard in the purport here, he is the grandson of Brahma. So there's Brahma, Chaturmukha Brahma, then we have Manu, and then one of the sons of Manu is Uttanapada. And Uttanapada's son is Dhruva Maharaj. And his story is told in the Bhagavatam, in the 4th canto. And it's a very special story because it shows how, you could say, childish behavior in combination with determination can actually lead to very rapid spiritual progress. So it's a very interesting story. And also a little bit of a sad story, you could say, but ultimately it's very inspiring, actually. And we also know in our tradition, we are from the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. ISKCON is part of the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. It is said that two of the main stories that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu liked to hear very much were the story of the young boy Dhruva from the Bhagavad Purana in the 4th canto, and the story of the young Prahlad, which is of course related to this temple, young Prahlad. So those two stories were very dear to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And of course it's children are naturally, when they behave in a very mature way, very early, it's very endearing, to see. At the same time, it will be always mixed. A child is a child, so will have a childish, behavior. But sometimes in their childish behavior, they might suddenly say something very mature, very deep, very thought through. And very often, also when children make a decision, it's very, you could say, final. They're very convinced. In a child's mind, they might change their mind, but when they say, they're very convinced. So those two boys here, Dhruva and Prahlad, showed very extraordinary levels of spiritual consciousness and spiritual elevation mixed with their natural childish behavior. So Dhruva was in a very, you could say, bad condition, bad situation, that he was the son of the second wife of Maharaj Uttanapada. So therefore he was a little bit disadvantaged. He was disadvantaged. And it was common that kings in previous times had more than one wife. Even it was not the ideal standard set by Ramachandra. Shri Ramachandra is Maryadama Purushottama. He is an exemplary human being. So he gave the example that he always remained married only to Sita. He never married a second time. Even when Sita was sent to the forest, he still remained, devoted to Sita, and even erected murti of Sita, to participate in all the ceremonies, and felt great separation. So this is the example, the ideal example, to take only one wife. But simultaneously it was common for kings to actually have more than one wife. And Ram's father himself, Dasharath Maharaj, had 3 wives. But of course that always, in the scriptures we will hear, it can lead and might lead to some conflicts, as always in the material world. And in this case, the favorite wife of Maharaj Uttanapada was the stepmother of Dhruva, and she disadvantaged him. Sangre Bhagwan ki jai. So she, in one specific situation, the young boy Dhruva wanted to climb on his father's lap while his stepbrother was also on his father's lap. So he wanted to also climb on his father's lap, who was sitting on the throne. And when he was attempting to do that, his stepmother intervened and said, "No, you first have to be born from my womb to be able to sit on the lap of your father on the throne." So she was very mean, very harsh. But that was not the worst. The worst part was that his father remained silent. Because this was his favorite queen, his favorite wife. So she had a lot of control over him, obviously. He didn't say anything. So the young boy, Dhruva, at that time it was described, was around 5-6 years old, small boy. Still, he had already enough, consciousness and you could say honor and ego that he was very hurt. He was very hurt, and left the place crying, went to his mother, and he was very, very hurt in his, you could say, especially because he was a young prince, a kshatriya. So his honor as a prince also was hurt. So he took advice from his mother, who told him that he could gain perfection or gain something very great by going to the forest, like the great sages and yogis who search for God there. But actually his main desire that he was cultivating was revenge. He wanted revenge. So he wanted revenge, and his revenge was very simple, because children, of course, require protection. That's the duty of the parents, to give protection to the children. And when children don't feel protected by their parents, that can leave a very deep trace, of character. So it will show in their character later on, actually, if the parents neglect this duty. So, but in his childish warrior mood, Dhruva Maharaj realized, well, if my father cannot give me protection, then I should have a greater position than him. It's very simple logic. He cannot help me, he cannot protect me, then I should have by myself a more powerful, greater position than my father, even than my grandfather or great-grandfather. So that was his childish, wish, which Lord Vishnu here is saying, although your desire is very ambitious and very difficult to fulfill, I shall favor you with its fulfillment, Lord Vishnu is saying. So it's very difficult, of course, because Brahma is technically controlling the entire universe, So how will you get a higher position than Brahma? So difficult, very difficult. But Lord Vishnu is promising that he will favor and he will fulfill that desire. So the young boy was, left the palace immediately with that, angry motivation, for revenge. But he was very determined at the same time, and also received the instruction from his mother that if you want to attain something great, if you want to attain God, you should go to the forest. The great sages go to the forest. And she was not thinking he will go immediately. She was thinking he might go when he's big, But he left immediately, as a young child. He left into the forest. And in the forest, the great sage Narada Muni met him. So Narada Muni is a very great personality. He's a direct disciple of Brahma himself. And he has freedom of movement within matter and spirit. It is described in the Bhagavad Purana. Basically, he is not bound by material laws. So he can enter the spiritual reality and exit it again and come into this world. So he's truly free to move and travel. And he's always aware what's going on. So you could say, in many stories we hear in the Bhagavatam, he is at the right place at the right moment. When something very relevant is happening, he knows about it and he's there. So He has eyes and ears everywhere, you could say. He can move also very fast. He can travel very fast. So Narada Muni heard, about the story of the young prince, son of Uttanapada, has left the palace and is in the forest. So he went to meet him, to meet the young boy, Dhruva. And he discouraged him. He said, "What are you doing here? You're too small. It's a very dangerous place. In the forest there are so many, voracious animals, poisonous snakes. It's a very wild place. You're a small boy. You're used to live in a palace, with so many amenities and so much protection. Go back to the forest. Go back to the palace. Don't stay in the forest." And the small boy Dhruva answered that, "If you can help me in attaining my purpose, then please help me. Otherwise, please get out of my way. I have something to achieve." So after he masterfully he could see that you could say Dhruva passed the test, and Narada Muni was also very impressed that this young boy has such a strong determination. So Narada Muni decided to teach him. And I heard recently from Radhanath Swami. He wrote a very interesting book, The Journey Home. You might have read it. It's a very nice book. And he describes how he, as a young boy, he was, I think, maybe 18, 19. He hitchhiked in the 70s from Europe, all the way to India. Very adventurous, journey. And when finally he arrived in the Himalayas in Rishikesh, he had the good luck to meet some yogis who showed him how to survive in the forest. And very practical things like, which leaves you can eat, which leaves are poisonous, which herb you can use to wash the body, which twigs you can use to clean your teeth, many practical things, how to survive in the jungles of the Himalayas, because the Himalayas are very well known that they can provide actually everything a yogi needs. There are so many berries and fruits and herbs, and also many caves, and many places for shelter and pure water. So many yogis, they retire and they take shelter. You can take his Mahaprasad, I think. Sandesh, was hast du denn gegeben? Huh? You will get later your Sandesh, he's saying. It's very nice, sweet Sandesh. Mahaprasad. So, yes, how to survive in the forest. So, but one interesting point that I just recently heard in a talk Maharaj gave was that, of course, in the forest there are many wild animals. Even nowadays in Rishikesh, if you've been there are many wild animals there. And at night time, usually around 8, maybe 9 p.m., they close certain roads, because they're dangerous, to drive even with a car at night. There are big elephants, some buffaloes, wild buffaloes, some leopards, so dangerous. And there's one famous elephant there in the forest between Dehradun and Rishikesh. He has killed 10 men already, so be careful. So of course to live in the forest is dangerous. So the question is, how do the yogis survive in the forest? And Radhanath Maharaj was saying that actually it's more easy to survive in the forest than to survive among humans. Because humans also have a false ego, and they also can be very aggressive, how many people are killed by people, many more probably. And he said that he learned from the yogis when he reached there in the Himalayas that you should not be afraid and you should not have anger. If you cultivate those two, the animals, they will feel it. They will feel threatened and they will feel that you are afraid, and they will attack you. But if you are not a threat for them, if you give them their space, then they will also give you your space. Yeah? So that's very interesting. Yeah? And it is true. It is described very often and how, because animals are actually driven by instinct, and also they have, of course, the Paramatma in each of their, hearts. So they have the natural intuition. And they feel if somebody is at peace with himself and he's pure and he's spiritual, they will not attack. They will just give him the space he requires. So like that, Dhruva learned from Narada Muni how to survive in the forest. How to survive in the forest. Not only that, he also learned from Narada Muni how to use whatever items are available in the forest to perform worship of the Lord. So sometimes we might think, I cannot worship the Lord because I don't have enough money or enough, ingredients, or I don't have a murti. But in that description, this is the previous chapter, there's a very, very nice description how Narada Muni instructs Dhruva that according to whatever is available in the forest, you can gather some twigs, you can gather some mud, you can gather some flowers, you can gather some water, and using these natural ingredients that are readily available, you can perform devotional worship. You can form a very simple form out of mud, and you can use the flowers from the forest, And in this connection, Srila Prabhupada gives very interesting purport where he says that in a similar way, wherever we might find ourselves, if you are in Europe, for example, there's different ingredients, and therefore Lord Nrsingadev here, he gets idlis every morning, but also he gets German bread regularly, offered. So whatever local ingredients are available, that can be used for the worship of the Lord. It should be, of course, sattvic, and clean, but otherwise there's no real restriction, that we have to offer only a very specific type, of food or offering. It should be according to the place, time, and circumstances. What is available, that should be used in the worship of the Lord. So Dhruva learned how to worship the Lord in the forest, how to survive in the forest. And also Dhruva received a mantra. He was initiated in a mantra, the 12-syllable mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this 12-syllable mantra was given by Narada Muni to Dhruva Maharaj. And chanting this mantra, he performed pranayama and asana yoga and meditated in the forest. And it is described that in the beginning he survived on roots, on berries, on leaves, that he could find in the forest. But relatively soon he stopped eating, and he was only drinking, clean, fresh water. And then he stopped drinking also, and he was only nourishing the body through prana itself. So when we inhale, we take prana. Actually, prana is sometimes translated as life force, sometimes inhalation, but you could say prana with capital P maybe, like the object prana is life energy, and prana is everywhere, available in different forms. So for example, when vegetables are very fresh, they're considered to be full of prana. If you freeze them and you store them for 2 years, then of course there is not much prana left. So the more fresh something is, the more prana is inside. Or grains also. When grains are not broken or spices are not broken, they still are containing all the prana. Basically, if you put some water, a plant can grow. So therefore, it is recommended or considered to be a very high standard if whatever grains or spices you use are freshly ground. The flavor will be much more stronger, and the prana, the nourishment will be greater. And of course, so prana is available in food, it's available in water. and the quality of water we drink, the quality of food we drink, make a big difference how much nourished you are, how much prana you get into your body. If you eat only, processed foods, or, flour that has been stored for many, many years already, in the shelves, ground, then it's very likely that actually instead of nourishing, it might be very heavy on your digesting system. And you will not feel energized, you will feel you have to invest a lot of energy to digest it. So that's prana. Prana is in food, it's also in water, but ultimately prana, of course, is when you inhale, you take prana into the body. On an exhalation, we exhale apana. Prana and apana, there are two main vayus out of the 5. And if you know the science and if you are expert, you can't survive on prana directly from the air only. The sun also is a great source of prana. So many yogis and also modern, you could say, experimentalists, have tried that, to survive only on prana or on sunlight. It is possible, although it might not be easily achieved, by most people. But this young boy, within a few months, already managed to do that. So he was only surviving on prana. He was standing upright, in a Tadasana, mountain-like pose, and the fulfillment or the culmination of pranayama is, as described in the Bhagavad Gita, that prana and apana, those two pranas, should become more and more subtle, means more and more fine, almost inaudible. In the beginning it's very audible, you might know Ujjayi breathing, Ujjayi pranayama. And when you practice for a long time, it becomes longer and longer, means each inhalation, exhalation become longer and longer, more and more subtle. And at the culmination of pranayama, prana and apana become indistinguishable and they merge into each other. So and if you achieve that position, basically you are fully in control of your, gross body and subtle body, and you can leave, you can transcend this material body, or consciously also, it's described, consciously exit the body, So some yogis practice this form of yoga, that they choose the right time of the moon cycles, according to the Vedas, and exit, through the Brahmarandra, you exit the body consciously, But to do that, you need to be fully in control, of prana, apana. So our young boy Dhruva achieved this position after half a year only. After only 6 months of practice, it is described that he achieved this feat. He was fully in control of his body. He was controlling his prana and apana. It merged into each other, and that led that he became, it's described, as heavy or as powerful as Vishnu even, and the entire cosmos was inhibited in his prana and apana. So basically, because prana and apana is happening everywhere, so the whole forest is breathing, everything is breathing, and his power became so strong that while he was controlling prana and apana, the entire cosmos also became inhibited by his, mystic power, you could say, or mystic achievement. So the devatas, they went to Lord Vishnu and asked for help. So the devatas, Srila Prabhupada translates devatas as demigods, not because they are half gods like in the Greek mythology. You have some god like Zeus having children with humans, and then it becomes a demigod, like Hercules maybe. But when Srila Prabhupada translates devatas as demigods, it's just to make a differentiation between a devata and Bhagavan. So devatas are in very high positions of power, of control, They control different elemental aspects of nature, like fire or wind or water, or Indra Deva. He controls, all the devatas. But all of them are mortal, So the position of Indra is a position, that can be occupied. Similar like now in Indian election starting, I think. So when the elections start and all the MPs, are afraid they will get a seat or they will lose their seat, So in a similar way, there are many stories, how Indra gets a little bit afraid, when there's some very powerful yogi, he gets afraid, this yogi might take my position as Indra. So in that sense, a devata is of course a very exalted living entity, but is not the same as Bhagavan. Technically, all of us, we can become, we can occupy, by qualification, we can occupy the positions of different devatas. You could say there are responsible positions, within the administration of the universe. But there is, if you read the Puranas and the Vedas, there is a very clear distinction, between devatas who are, responsible for material affairs, and Bhagavan who is transcendent, Or like Shankaracharya says it in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, Narayano paro vyaktat, which means that Narayana, or Vishnu, Krishna, it's the same, is beyond the Vyaktat, the manifested world. So Vyaktat includes everything, all the devatas, all the demigods, Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu, Indra, Agni. And these devatas, at this point, we hear in the previous chapter, they were inhibited in their breeding as well. So usually when the devatas are inhibited or harassed also by the daityas or danavas, the demons, they always take shelter of either Lord Shiva or Lord Vishnu. Sometimes Brahma, if it's a minor, problem, because Brahma is more exalted. But there's a very clear hierarchy. There's the primary devatas who are headed by Indra, then we have Tapaloka, Mahaloka, Janaloka, very exalted yogis, and then in Satyaloka we have Brahma himself, then we have Kailash, Lord Shiva, and ultimately we have Vaikuntha. So this hierarchy is very clearly mentioned in the Puranas, and therefore Srila Prabhupada translated devatas as demigods to make it in English very easily understood, or in generally to be understood, because people get confused. If you use the word God for everything, then big confusion, But in Sanskrit there's many different words, Upadevata, Devata, Yakshas, and they're all not just gods, they're different, very different entities, different qualities. So when we translate everything as God, everybody gets confused. So Srila Prabhupada used this distinction, demigod and God, to make it more clear. And some Sanskrit scholars, they are confused, they wonder why Prabhupada did it. Because the word devata doesn't mean literally demigod, it means just devata, somebody who has some responsibility for a certain aspect of nature. So the devatas, they could not breathe, and they took shelter of Lord Vishnu, and Lord Vishnu said, I will go and I will pacify that boy. So the young boy Dhruva then was very, at this point of realization, when he managed to control prana and apana, had a clear vision of Paramatma in his heart. So the Paramatma or Antaryami is described to be, this size more or less in the heart. And he had this vision and he was very glad, very happy. It's similar to when you see the altar, the altar opens and there's the Murti. So Paramatma is like the Murti in our heart, he's always there, present. And that made him very, very happy. And the next moment, this vision disappeared and he became very, you could say, restless. And he opened his eyes and the same form he saw in his heart, now he saw standing right in front of him. And then something very different occurred, or like a different situation arose. When he was seeing Paramatma in his heart, he was just happy, getting this darshan, just like when you get darshan of Nrsimhadev or in a temple. But when Bhagavan was standing right in front of him, he did not know how to react or what to do. So that's the difference between Paramatma and Bhagavan. Paramatma is Sat and Chit, it's eternal, it's full of consciousness, but there is no Ananda relationship, There's no real exchange, Maybe a pujari who is on the altar, he might have a more intimate relationship with the deity, but usually for somebody who is standing in front of the deity, usually we just get darshan, And the more you are, you could say, advanced, you realize it's not just a murti, actually it's Bhagavan, And then the relationship becomes more deep and you have the feeling you have to pray. So the same happened to Dhruva. When he saw Bhagavan in front of him, he became completely overwhelmed, Suddenly his, all his different symptoms of ecstasy manifested, He became choked, he could not speak, and then Vishnu touched his head with his conch shell, with the shankha, and then the small boy Dhruva offered many beautiful prayers. So these prayers just ended actually, the previous verses. That was the end of the prayers, around a dozen of verses, where Dhruva Maharaj was offering very, very beautiful prayers. And we hear that one of the realizations that Dhruva had in these prayers was that he originally had prayed to have a greater kingdom than his great-grandfather. That was his original motivation. His motivation was material and was, you could say, selfish, to some extent. But it was also mixed with a very innocent, fully dedicated way of taking shelter of Vishnu. So it was a mixture. He was fully dedicated and very innocently he was taking shelter of Vishnu. At the same time, his original desire and ambition was for material power and position, Hare Krishna. So this motivation for power, he realized that actually the way Dhruva Maharaj described it is very poetic and very nice. So the young boy Dhruva said to Vishnu, "Shh, hey, if you want to sit in the lecture, you have to focus on here, okay?" Hare Krishna, welcome. So we're talking about Dhruva, he's a young boy. And this young boy Dhruva, he wanted to have a greater kingdom than even Brahma's. But the moment he actually saw Vishnu standing in front of him, he expressed it in this way. He said that I was looking for broken glass, and now I have received diamonds. So this was his realization, that the desire he had for power, wealth, and position, to be able to take revenge, actually in comparison to having the direct darshan and, you could say, connection and relationship with God, with Bhagavan, there is no comparison. Having God put everything in its shadow. So this is described in the Bhagavad Gita as the Param Drishtva Nivartante, or Srila Prabhupada translated it as the higher taste, the higher taste. So it's also one of our cookbooks are called the higher taste, because we will not be able to appreciate something higher unless we actually taste it. Or in other words, you will not be able to give up something lower unless you have something higher. So a very simple example would be, I don't know, if you spend some time in jail, maybe, hopefully not, maybe you only get bread and water, bread and water. So when somebody, offers you a hot, steaming pizza, it's very clear what the choice is, You immediately forget, the water and the dry bread, and you take the pizza. So in a similar way, when Dhruva saw Vishnu in front of him, he realized, all this power, kingdoms, was nothing, in comparison to just being in connection with Vishnu. But at the same time, we hear something very interesting now. Will be in the next chapters, but in the next verses. But I will tell it now already. Is that we hear that Vishnu is saying, although your desire is very ambitious and very difficult to fulfill, for a young boy to have so much power, I will fulfill it. And we will hear now that Dhruva actually is saying then, no, please don't. I don't want the power anymore. I just want to be with you. But Lord Vishnu says, you will be eventually with me, but you desired it so much, now you have to take it. You have to take responsibility for what you desired. So this is very interesting, because Dhruva at that point was not interested anymore in having a great kingdom. But because it was his desire, it was fulfilled. So one of the very important lessons that we can take, besides the amazing determination that he had, is that you should be very careful what you are determined to get. You should think twice what you wish. Because when it comes true, then you might be not prepared for it, anymore. So what desires you cultivate, what you're thinking about, I want this, I want this, I want this, you should think twice if you really want it, or what you will do when you have it, Because once you have it, you might realize you don't want it anymore, or maybe it's too much also, too much responsibility might also be a situation. So yes, we should be careful what we wish for. Okay, I think I'll stop here, but maybe there are some questions or comments. We have a mic. If you want to ask something, you can say. Otherwise, we will end the lecture here. Hare Krishna. Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai. Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai. Nasingari Bhagwan ki jai. So in 8 minutes there will be breakfast, so you can all take darshan and then you can head down to the prasadam hall. Hare Krishna. Huh? Okay, there's a question from Shireen from the live.
So yeah. What if we desire something that is not good for us or even destructive, but we don't realize when we desire? Would it still be fulfilled like Dhruva Maharaj? Because won't Krishna know what is best for us?
Yes, so this is described in the second canto of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. There is a very interesting verse where it is said that Krishna says that if you have material desires, come to me. If you have no desires, come to me. If you have desire for liberation, come to me. So in any case, always go to Krishna. So even if you have material desires, we should come with these desires towards Krishna. And the explanation is that Krishna ultimately knows what is best for us. So according to the time, place and circumstances, and also knowing your character, knowing your heart, he might or might not fulfill your desires. So we heard here that Dhruva was a very unique situation. That he was actually able to handle being spiritually advanced and at the same time having material power and wealth. In most situations that might be at odds. We might become intoxicated or overwhelmed by power and wealth. But at the same time there are many examples of great personalities, kings, or very great philanthropic families who were very wealthy, and they used their wealth wisely. So it is possible to have both. And the point is, the idea is we should approach with whatever desire we have the Lord as sincere as possible, and He will decide what He will fulfill or not. And usually we can trust that He will only fulfill what is really beneficial for us. So if He knows that you have this strong desire for power and wealth, But if you get that power and wealth, you will be completely corrupted. It's very likely he will not fulfill it. Like that. Okay. Yes. Maybe you can take the mic. If you wait for the mic, then the live online audience can also hear.
Is it?
Yeah, it's on.
You can hear?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay. So it was very beautiful to hear the story of Dhruva Maharaj. And about this last point, my Guru Maharaj said it's very good to say before any prayer, Lord, if you willing. So give him this space that he can decide what is the best for us.
Yeah, this is very smart. I heard also, especially because we are here at a special temple, we are at Narasingha temple. So Narasingha Dev is a very unique avatar of Krishna, of Vishnu. He's like a lion mother, he's protecting the small boy Prahlad. So that's the mood of Narasingha. He's in a protective mood. And this protection is towards all the devotees or anybody who takes shelter. But a lion mother is very wrathful, If you know, like that's one important tip, If there is a lion mother nearby, don't tease the lion calves, You will be in trouble, So, in a very similar way, the Lord is not only protecting externally, towards external threats that might be there, but ultimately the protection that the Lord is giving us is internal, internal purification, and there might be some anarthas, unwanted habits that we might carry along with us, that we know it's not a good habit, but we might still, engage in it, So when you pray to Nrsingadev to help you clarify those bad habits, many devotees have this experience that they say, please, please, whatever it takes, just help me, just purify my heart. And then after some years they realize and they say, Lord, please do it gently. Because Lord Nrsingadev is very powerful. He's wrathful like a lion mother. So if you ask for his shelter and for his purification, he might purify us in a way that we might, find a little bit, too strong. Because basically when we are attached, the more we are attached to something material or external, it is painful to give it up. So you might have the idea that it's good to give it up, but you might not be really ready to give it up. So like that, it's always good, like Mataji was saying, to say, according to your discrimination, what's best for me, please accordingly, help me. Yes.
I have one question. What Lord Krishna advise for this young kids, from his childhood point of view, how they want to enjoy the life, study point of view? If you can guide a little bit, some words to these kids, that would be great.
So we are hearing now we were mentioning that there's two main stories in the Bhagavatam about children. There's the story of Dhruva, and then there's the story of Prahlad, So these are two very famous stories in the Bhagavatam. And I was mentioning in the very beginning, when a child has the ability to be mature, it's very endearing, But of course, you cannot expect all children to be mature, So Prahlad and Dhruva, they show this very strong character that even at a very young age, they were very mature, and very determined in their dealings. And the boy Prahlad, we have this painting there. There's this Prahlad dancing with his classmates in school. And there's a very famous story. So the young boy Dhruva, Prahlad, he was trained by his father, or giving under the care of teachers in Gurukul, but it was a Gurukul for Daityas, Danavas. So they were trying to train him to be a very powerful warrior, to be a good diplomat, to be to discern between friends and enemies, And when he was being, you could say, indoctrinated, to become a good warrior, a good heir, the young boy Prahlad had this natural instinct to say no. Why should I distinguish between friends and enemies? Why should I distinguish between different entities? We're all ultimately children of God. So he had this maturity, and then when the teachers left, Prahlad started teaching himself. So he started teaching his friends, and he told his friends that actually life is very short. Life is very short, and life passes very fast. And he made a very interesting calculation. He said that out of 100 years, we spend, probably around minimum 1/3, means more than 30 years, we spend sleeping. 30 years sleeping, imagine, 30 years sleeping, Of course, we do every day a little bit, but in total, you're sleeping 30 years. And then so and so many years we spend eating, so and so many years we spend, working, so and so many years we spend with childish games, So he asked his friends, how much time does really remain for the real purpose of life? So that's something very interesting, and his conclusion is very simple, and he said, therefore, even if you're a child, you can already start with spiritual life. Because sometimes we have this idea, I'm too young, he's too young, he's a child, we shouldn't start. Later he can become spiritual, And then, of course, you are a teenager and you're too distracted, to do spiritual life. And then when you're an adult, you're too busy to do spiritual life, And then you're too old, and then it might be too late, So Prahlad basically was saying, spiritual activities are actually fun. Spiritual activities are, in general, like if we make spiritual activities fun for our children, then it's something natural, But of course, there's so many distractions nowadays, video games, television, cell phones, all very powerful tools, And the less we can, because basically this world, this body that we have, already is a very powerful distraction. We can get very attached to it. We identify as women, as men, as this nationality, that nationality, and we fight, and there's all kinds of interest conflicts. But when we become engaged with devices, games, and social media, we extend this identification even further. It's another layer of identification. So we know that, for example, the greatest CEOs in tech, in Silicon Valley, like Steve Jobs, for example, and many others, many examples, they do not give devices to their children until the age of 12. Because sometimes they say, the younger the better, they can learn technology. But actually, to do this and this is not very advanced, If a child, because any baby can start doing that, You'll see small babies, they know how to manage a phone very soon, But to touch things, to work with things, to do music, to do some handicrafts, to memorize something, all of these activities are much more, you could say, enhancing and advancing the child's development. And cell phones certainly are not so good, really bad actually. Yes. I'm sorry, children will be mad at me now. Now parents will forbid the phones. But it's actually for the best of you. If you can give it up voluntarily, then you're smart. Hare Krishna. Grantarat Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai. Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai. Nrsimhadev Bhagwan ki jai.